Holy crap, there we go. I've been talking for like 3 whole minutes with absolutely no audio because my microphone jack was loose. must have got caught on my wheel. I'm glad I looked and noticed. Man, can you imagine? Can you imagine if I went like a full 2-hour stream and didn't even realize my microphone wasn't working? That'd be embarrassing. It's embarrassing enough that I went 3 whole minutes without noticing it. All the diagnostics and stuff are so small, and I don't like having a feed into my ear of my own voice because it trips me up. It freaks me out to hear my own voice, especially if there's like a small delay. So, anyway, just to recap everything I said, hi, hope everything is going well for everyone. Hey, El Blabo, good to see you here. Hopefully everything's going well for everyone. Things are going well for me. And we're working on some writing. That's what I tried to say the first 3 minutes when my mic was not plugged in. Does it show that I'm an amateur and I have no idea what I'm doing? So we were just about to start a quick recap of what we've been working on so far. We're working on a campaign intended to be a campaign that'll take a group of maybe about 5 players from levels 1 to 5 or 1 to 10, excuse me. That we're working on. They'll be presumably about level 5. And the basic premise of this campaign that we're working on is it's a post-apocalyptic from like a fantasy standpoint, so like a post-calamity type of world where there are very few existing protected, safe societal cities, and the rest of the world is kind of overrun by horrible, awful monstrosities. That part of the world is known as the wilds. A lot of these cities, though, as time has passed, a lot of this insanity has started to slowly die down a little bit. And so there are a lot of efforts to try and start reclaiming much of this world that was lost. Part of that is where this campaign opens up, with our players being part of an effort to map out and establish a reasonably safe and protectable, right, like a route that can be protected for trade between some of these major cities. There's one up to the north over here, and one further down to the south down there. However, in doing so, what our players were not thinking of is that they are now in the territory of a dragon who's not super thrilled about his territory being quote-unquote invaded by other humanoids. And so he's all like, "Hey, you can't be here." And everyone's like, "Well, what if we made a trade? Is there something we can do for you in exchange for permission to make our trade route?" Assuming that the players will accept the call to adventure, which I'm assuming they will. Otherwise, it's like, "Okay, great. Our campaign is done on level 1. You all die to a dragon." But assuming they take the call to adventure, the dragon's like, "Okay, I'm trying to get access to this place down here called the Hall of Wisdom. It's been locked up. I haven't found any of the keys, but I want in. If you can get me the keys to this place, I will let you build your road." So players then start doing research on what on earth they need to do to get access to this place. They'll go back to their city, their sort of outpost city over here that's been established, can start doing some research with the help of the scholars, and their first story beat will bring them up over into here, this part of the mountains, which is giant territory. Eventually, they'll find that first key hidden amongst the giants, and then they'll go back, do a little more research, and then that brings them down here. Eventually, their next lead is to the city of Khagdural here, which is an abandoned Dwarven city, or so they assumed as they were getting here. They traveled through some horrible underground, undermountain things, very, very Mines of Moria in inspiration, and eventually found the city to, instead of being abandoned like they thought, it is now actually overrun with Duragar. Either they get captured or they evade capture. Either way, they have to navigate, either through sneaking or through negotiation, a way to gain access or gain permission in some way, shape, or form to access the vaults, the ancient Dwarven vaults. They'll learn in some way, shape, or form that the Duragar have been trying to get access to these vaults where the Dwarven treasure is. However, it is a combination of locked and sealed tight, as well as the pathway to get there is overrun with horrible things. And so now the players are like, "Hey, that seems like a place where there might be a key hidden if it was being guarded by the dwarves." And so that's where we are. We're now trying to figure out exactly how we want to design a dungeon in here that will represent accessing underground Dwarven like treasure vaults and stuff. So we've been working on that this past week, and the last thing we kind of worked on is I went through and we set up our general difficulty distribution based on assuming our players will be level 5 and should have the potential to encounter enough enemies to reach level 6 by the end of this dungeon. We're getting to a pretty extensive thing, and honestly, the term dungeon, I use that very loosely. Very, very loosely do I use the term dungeon. It's more so like a large instance or a trip away from civilization. So we've kind of mapped out our experience points, and the next thing I kind of want to do is start working on our villains and figure out like what kind of enemies or even allies are going to be in there. So let's see here. Make your own homebrew. How would you do it? Just turn down the. Oh, is the music a little loud? It's so hard to know. It's so hard to know exactly what the volume, what the levels are here. Let me dip the music just a bit. Let's so I want the music there. I feel like that kind of adds to the chillness there. Let's dip the music there and see what that does for us. Hopefully that'll be a bit better. I feel like it's hard too because I feel like sometimes some songs are quieter than others. But I'll put it right there and we'll see what that does for us. So thank you for letting me know. If you were to make your own homebrew story, how would you do it? Oh, that's a big question. That's a big question. I mean, so I'm going through the process of doing an entire homebrew thing, and so you can see a lot of the work that I go into, or a lot of work that I put into making it. So as far as like how I do it, you can check out a whole lot of my stuff and get a whole lot of ideas. But as a general idea, I guess the way I would suggest you do it is start with like your most broad idea that you have and get that written down. The most, like the biggest, most broad stroke of the brush that you can think of. So like if I were to use this campaign that we're working on, right, the biggest, broadest idea is there's a vault that's locked up and they need to get the keys to get in, right? That is like the most broad sense that we can think of. And then from there you start editing it into multiple smaller bits that can then become a bit easier to manage and conceptualize a more detailed story. So from there, so we've got vault needs keys. Okay, well let's edit it down. So now we know we have this concept and we need keys. How many keys do we want to do? Let's for this dungeon or for this campaign, we're going to say, okay, we're going to do 4 keys. 4 keys because that can subdivide into a lot of like purposeful story beats, right? So if we that kind of gives us 5 big story beats where it's like, okay, we need to find key 1, key 2, key 3, key 4, and then access the vault. That's like 5 good story bits there, and then you can think to yourself like, okay, well then what's how do we go about finding these keys? Are they all in one place? Are they all separated out? And you start to, and you from that really broad, big nucleus, right, you start to branch out and add bits of detail. For me, I approach it as a world building thing, and so when I'm making all of these things, we're adding stat blocks and adding an order to how players will encounter them. But generally speaking, when I'm thinking about this, I'm more so thinking about the world and how everything comes together, right? So we have if we pull out our map again, right? So we start with a broad stroke map, right? With just like a whole bunch of stuff here. We've got some landmarks, and I think like, okay, well let's put the vault down here, right? And then let's think about, okay, if someone were trying to hide the keys to here, what would they, where would they do that? Well, we've got mountains, which are a very good place to hide things. Very hard to search through mountains. We've got a forest here. We can hide something deep in the forest. And then we've also got a little water feature here that we can definitely hide some stuff in, right? So we've got some good hiding places. We did one above the mountains, one underneath the mountains. We're going to do one in the forest, one in there. And then I think about, okay, what sort of significance would be involved in these? Like, would someone to hide the keys in the mountains, would they have just like flown over the mountains and just tossed it and been like, all right, it lands where it lands? Or would they have been more purposeful in how they hit it, right? And so I try to think about how this world fits together, and then when I start trying to make a campaign out of it, it's less of how do I lead my players to do exactly what needs to be done to access this. Instead, it's like, how do I present clues so that players can find these places that just logically exist. So that's one way that you can kind of approach building a setting for all of this stuff. But yeah, like I say, it's a big question. It's a big question. How do you build a homebrew story? And I think the most fundamental idea is to think to yourself, what kind of story or setting or whatever is inspiring to you? What are you trying to create here? Start with a big, broad nucleus of an idea, and then go through just countless editing processes to narrow it down, and make it smaller and smaller. And, you know, I've been world building and homebrewing, you know, and DMing for the better part of a decade at this point. So I have a lot of practice, so it's a lot easier for me to approach a new project and already kind of understand what my checklist is. But if it's your first time doing it, start with the broad idea and then just edit it. I think that's one of the most important things I ever learned about writing things, is that don't try to get it right the first time. Don't sit there thinking about it too much and get it right the first time. Get something down and then edit it. Writing for me is almost more just adding more and more and more and more layers of editing until you have the exact detailed story that you want. So those are some very broad tips, but hopefully there's a place to start there. Because you want more, as in D&D, so much that you don't know. I don't know if I'm comprehending exactly, but yes, D&D is a very hefty and intense thing to approach. And so, when it comes to homebrewing a D&D thing specifically, that's where it comes into play, where I'm talking about work on doing world building and consider the world you want to make. Consider what's going on in your brain and your imagination, and write down the setting, and then look through the existing D&D stuff and start adding stat blocks and rules and stuff where they make sense. Is I guess what my recommendation would be as far as like specifically a D&D thing. Because if you start off looking at specific D&D rules and you're like, oh well, I like a gnome, or I like gnolls, where can I put those in? It can be a bit harder. So yeah, I don't know. The other thing that's difficult about it is I think everyone has their own approach to it, and I think it's going to be kind of what makes the most sense, which is why the most fundamental thing you can do is start writing and edit it until you have what you want. Playing person also need the books. Yeah, the books help. The books help if you're doing a D&D specific thing. That's for sure. One thing that's nice too, if you approach it from a build a world and then layer the rules on top of it, is if you decide you want to play a different rule set, it's easier to lift the D&D rules off of the setting that you've written down and then plop on other things, like another rule set. So like with this campaign that I'm working on right now, like there is a lot of very specific D&D stats and stuff that go in there. But the flip side of it is all of the foundational stuff, all of the setting based stuff is independent of D&D rules. You know, I have thought about, okay, I want this setting, I want this campaign to happen, I want, say, this part to take place under the mountains, and I want the type of creatures that they encounter to be these types of monstrosities that they find under the mountains. And then I go through and find D&D specific monsters that will fit that setting. But if I decide I want to play this game as something else, like as a Call of Cthulhu game or whatever that takes place under mountains, I can take out all of the D&D specific stuff and just go through the same process and look through the Call of Cthulhu rules and be like, all right, well, we'll put in this creature and that creature, and we'll put in that rule set and that type of trap. And so it kind of makes things a bit more modular and easier to substitute and change around when you need to. So I don't know. I feel like these are all very broad strokes ideas that may or may not be helpful. But those are just some tips that I would recommend. But like I can't emphasize enough, the biggest thing to do is just start writing. Just start writing stuff. If you're wanting to make a homebrew world, just think about what do you want your world to look like, what kind of stuff do you want in there, and just start writing it. Because as you go, you'll edit and you'll change things, and you realize, oh, well, I guess I want this to be more in this way or more like this. And so you can start making the edits as you go and continue to understand better what it is you're trying to achieve with what you're trying to write. Because a lot of times when you start writing something, you have a generalized idea, but you don't know all of the exact specifics. And if you sit there and try to understand all of the specifics before you even get anything written down, you'll get that sort of analysis paralysis that I talk about a lot, where you're just like, oh, well, I don't know if I want to write that because I don't know if it makes sense, or I don't know if it'll make sense with the thing that I do in the future, or I don't know how to achieve that. Write down what you do have, and then start editing things. Put in details. If there's something that you have, like if you have one scene or one battle that is just crystal clear in your mind how you want it, write that down and start building and editing out from there, right? Like if you just have this really cool idea for a puzzle that'll eventually lead to a treasure, write down that puzzle, get that written down, and then think to yourself like, okay, well, I've got this really cool puzzle. Now how do I get my players to that puzzle? And then you start adding that bit in there. And if you just have a general idea of like, oh, well, maybe they're treasure hunters, great. Write what, the starting point is, the treasure hunters guild and stuff. And see, already we're starting to expand and build. So that's the best advice I can give, is just start writing. Start writing. Don't be embarrassed if it's imperfect. Don't be upset if it's imperfect, because you can change any of it at any point in time because it's your creation. Right? And so it's like all of these things, I go and write them down with the understanding that if I change my mind about something, I can go in, I can change it, I can nix it. I do that all the time with stuff that I've written. And I'll even finish and have a completely finished campaign that I start my players on. And then 4 sessions in, the players start turning it in a different direction. And I'm like, oh, well, I want to let them go that direction. We'll just start modifying the stuff that I have written down for them. And we'll start making changes so that we can accommodate what exactly they're working on. And you just go with it. So I don't know, hopefully there are a few nuggets of ideas and helpful information there for you. Maybe not, because that was a lot of rambling, but hopefully there's something good in there for you. But let's go ahead and do some work here. So there's a couple things that I want to do as I've been kind of thinking and doing this. Let's see here. Oh, what do you got? Good. I'm glad that helps. Yeah, and I mean, that's the thing too. You've just been searching and reading stuff and playing based on what you found. I mean, that's how I got started. And I've just been doing it for long enough that now I have a strong grasp and understanding enough that I can start helping other people start to kind of follow that same journey. But that right there is the sort of the crew of it, is just dive in. Just dive in and work on stuff, and you'll get better and you'll get better. It's just like anything, right? It's like your first time playing a sport. The first time you do it, the first time you swing a golf club, it's going to look sloppy and horrible, right? And you don't know if you're doing it right. But then you do it for a year and you're going to look a little bit better, and you do it for another 5 years and you get better, and pretty soon you're good enough that you can enter amateur tournaments and stuff, right? And so it's just, that's how we get better at stuff, is we just try it and we work on it and we improve. So I think you're on the right path. If you're just looking up how to do stuff and you're trying based on what you understand and the ideas you have, that's the best thing you can be doing, is just keep working on it, keep practicing. But okay, so I had an idea for some allies here. Our dungeons are getting big enough. So as I like to do, the early dungeons are short, simple, smaller, not super dangerous for our level 1 players. But as they get better, as they level up, and as our dungeons are getting bigger, or as they're getting further in the story, our dungeons are getting bigger, more complex, more challenging. And so at this point in time, this dungeon that we're going to design is going to end up having 50 rooms in it. And so because of that, I want to start adding in more complexity to these dungeons, as opposed to just simply getting through to the end. I want to start adding a whole lot of other, sort of side quest type stuff within these dungeons. And so what I've really thought about with this one is, if we assume our players are captured, which is sort of the primary idea of them entering this Duergar city, if they are captured, they don't manage to avoid being nabbed by these guys. And they're going to have the chance to discuss with the Duergar king that he wants access to these vaults, and he'll let them go if they help him get access to these vaults. And one thing he's a tidbit of information that he's going to drop on them is that they have tried their own excursions to these vaults that have just not been successful. And so he sees how effectively these guys are navigating the mountains and the horrible, horrible things that are in them. And he's like, you seem like you've got a pretty good chance at this. If you can pull it off, we'll let you go. And so I was thinking it would be a really cool thing, a really interesting role-playing exercise for them to encounter some of these Duragar who might be normally enemies, but they've been lost and abandoned down in, like, trying to get to these vaults. They've been stuck here for weeks or months or whatever. And so now suddenly they have like that sort of unlikely allies type of situation. I kind of want to set that up. So I'm going to put a footnote there and see what we can do with that. I'm going to try and work something out of that. So we're going to say Duragar, I don't know, Duragar explorers, we'll call them right now. There might be a better term for them. But I think that would be really good. Oh, thanks. Yeah, I think it'll be a really interesting thing. I think it'll be a really interesting bit of complexity there. Let's say, oh, what did you got? Had to play out as a fighter. Let's say that multi-attack was a bonus. It's fun. Yeah, I mean, so that right there hits on a really important thing, and for me, my DM style, rules are there, but the game and enjoyment comes first. So as long as you're having fun, bend and break those rules all you want. Tell the story and have fun with your friends first and foremost. It sounds like you got that, and that's one of the best tips as a DM. Instead of the writing part, instead of like on the front of running a game, that's definitely the way to approach it. Because if we want to do unyielding rules, then play a video game. Right? The computer, unless you can get in there and mod it, but generally speaking, a computer doesn't care about your emotions. It doesn't care if you wish you could do this, that, or the other thing. It's programmed to do something, and it will do that. Play Dark Souls if you want merciless rules. D&D is like shared. I think about D&D as almost like a shared storytelling experience, right? It's like for you and your friends, you're doing your own little story improv session. And it's about a group of people coming together to build a story. The DM builds the framework and has the setting and the plot in place, and the players come up with the details within the story that you're telling. So, all right. So let's see here. Duragar Explorers. Let's give some information here. So I have my little template here to help me remember everything that I want to put with these guys here. This is one of the reasons that I love having my templates that I've come up with, and these templates are pretty specific to how I run my games, so they may or may not be full of information that's helpful for anyone else, but for me, what I like to provide for my players, this covers it all. So I like to follow these. So we got our who and what here. We got to add have the map because they were fighting pirates and really wanted a map. Hell yeah. I like to hide maps for areas within that area. So like within this dungeon, there will be maps for this dungeon, but they won't get them at the outset. They might find them if they're clever enough and they can solve all the puzzles and they explore the whole dungeon thoroughly. They might be able to find a map to give them an easier time navigating things. Otherwise, they'll have to just go in and navigate it blind. But maps are an awesome tool. And I love the concept of pirates because actually one of the groups my group that I'm DMing for right now is a pirate group. So that resonates with me for sure. Let's see. Okay, so the Duragar been sending in their own excursions, trying to access the vaults. None have been successful, and many haven't returned at all and are presumed dead. Let's see here. But that's not the case, and a few have managed to hunker down and survive, though their supplies are limited and they have not been able to find their way out yet. Boom. That's perfect. I like that. Baldur's Gate and Descent into Avernus. Yes, I am familiar. With those. Absolutely. Hey, Gabby, how's it going? Let's see here. I don't know if there's really even anything else we need to put for details yet. I haven't exactly thought about where I'm going to put them or exactly how I'm going to use them. But I want them in there. I want them in there, and I want them as potential allies. I'm thinking we can kind of set them up and have them have a few different options for what players can do with these Duergar. I kind of have this thought in my mind that it's like, if they're good at negotiating and they're friendly towards these Duergar, they can work on trying to get some information from them, right? Or some sort of tool, maybe just something to help them gain access to the vault. Like maybe there's a vault key, right? Maybe they need to find like the actual keys itself to the vault, and maybe the Duergar have, like, the Duergar king doesn't have it, right? And he doesn't even know that it's there. So it's like if the players find this group, they can learn that, like, oh, they need a key, or maybe even the Duergar have a copy of the key. You know, the key is like hidden elsewhere in this dungeon somewhere or something like that. I don't know. There's some seedling ideas here, and what we can do is we can put some information here, and we can kind of build upon that. And this is where I'm talking about, where you just put in the broad strokes of what you're working on. And then you can start modifying it as you go. You add more details as it becomes clear to you, and you work on other things. The why, as in why are they here? They were tasked with trying to access the vault, but have been unable to for various reasons. Let's see here, and like from, it's just, we'll put some bits here. Let's see here. Ways to help players, and then we'll go in here. Have a key of some sort, question mark. Useful info for navigating and avoiding dangers, question mark. And then we can also do extra rewards for helping them get out of here. Those are a few ideas that I have kind of rattling around in the largely empty cranium that rests on my shoulders here. But we can do that. And so, let's see, we're talking about tactics and combat and stat blocks and stuff. So this is one of the hard things about allies in dungeons. I'm always hesitant to have, at the very least, to have super involved allies as far as combat goes. Because I designed the combats for the number of players with the intention of them being the ones to fight them. So I worry sometimes that allies would make things too easy. There's, depending on the importance of the ally, there's always the risk that the ally dies. So if they're going to be a critical, essential part of it, then, you know, then you have to give them a certain amount of plot armor, and it's hard to, it can be hard to enforce that plot armor if the players are just absolutely murder hoboing their way through things and keep getting themselves and their charges into trouble, right? So there's challenges with that. And then the other thing that's always hard for me is I am not a fan, and I think most DMs would agree with this. I am not a fan of taking away glory of winning combat from my players. I don't like having the DM PC effect, right, of me killing my own monsters and taking away that fun, exciting battle glory that some player is going to be able to get. So I'm always hesitant to have them involved in combat. So what I want to do here is we're gonna do combat options, maybe, right? Because this is still broad strokes and stuff. We'll refine this as we go. Combat options. Prefer to avoid having as combatants. We can say perhaps refuse to work directly with non-Duergar, so we can just make them like super racist assholes. We can do something like that. We can say 2 injured to fight, and we can also just add a little bit here. 2 injured to fight would also offer explanation why they are just hiding rather than trying to escape, right? It's like if they're too injured to be able to go on, that sort of gives us our reasoning behind why they're just there. Like, it's like, if they're alive, why didn't you just leave? It's like, well, because they're all injured and stuff. So we can do that. We'll say, and like the thing here though, I think what's good about this is, I think what I want to do is try and mark them as non-essential. Keep non-essential to story so that they can die without derailing everything. You can do something like that, right? Yeah, so we can say, yeah, and that would really play in there with like the extra rewards for helping them get out, right? It's like, if they're like, we can add in, there's like a little mention with the king, or we have where did we put them? Oh, they're over in here in our actual city page, right? We have some of these underlings, like the puppet masters here, like Gwynwaine, right? Who's the resistance leader. She's the member, the leading member of the party of Duergar that are like, hey, you know, we'd rather be an accepted part of the world as opposed to a conquesting part of this world, right? Because that's what the Duergar king is after. He wants a Duergar empire that's worldwide, is what he wants. He wants entire control of all the land, right? And Gwynwaine is the leader of the group of Duergar that are all like, that seems a little extreme. Maybe we just keep our kingdom as it is now that we've kind of taken over this, and work on establishing ourselves as allies and trade partners, right? And so that's what Gwynwaine is. And so maybe it's like, she's like, hey, you know, if you can find some other people, you know, maybe you can help convince them to join our cause because they've been abandoned down there, you know. Or maybe the king himself is all like, I'll give you extra rewards if you can rescue any of our people that are lost down there. You know, we can come up with ideas like that. That would be good. That would be good. I don't know. There's a lot of ideas here. Lots of ideas here. And I'm just going to add a section here. Actually, we can add it to here. Extra rewards for helping them out. King wants his men returned if they're alive. We can do Gwynwaine thinks they can be turned to her cause because they were abandoned by the king. Just put in little notes right there, right? And we'll refine, like I said, we'll refine this as we go. I think a lot of how I end up using these guys is going to end up relating to how the rest of the dungeon ends up playing out. Like, where do we put them? You know, and all that kind of stuff. And because, like, you know, we want to figure out where we put them based on kind of how the map plays out. But then where we put them will influence exactly, like, what's keeping them down there. What kind of attitudes are they going to have? How far did they make it? Do they have keys? Would they have made it far enough to find those keys? So on and so forth. So there's a lot of stuff a lot of details about these guys that will, I think, come to light the more we get into it. More we get into what we're working on a broader sense here. But I think that's good. I think that's really good. I think it's a really good idea to have them there. The only other thing that I'm wondering here, I'm going to... that's an unimportant call. I'm not going to answer that one. Let's see here. I need to underline this. The other thing that I'm actually going to put in here, we need to underline. That's what I was trying to do. I'm going to put in here gonna put in Gwynplaine here. What was her last name? I forgot what her last name was, even though I was just looking at it. Hellbreaker. That's right. That's such a cool last name. Gwynplaine Hellbreaker. I'm gonna put her in there, even though she's not in the dungeon itself. We're gonna say not in the dungeon itself, but is someone who isn't a fan of the Durgar King and could serve as a source of side missions for them to work on in the dungeon. And we'll just do some things like you can just add like little notes here. Maybe we'll cut a deal with players to get some sort of vault treasure for her. Maybe she knows of other things in this part of the mountain that would help. That would help her cause. Where's cause? There we go. Yeah. I don't know exactly how to utilize her, but I feel like the fact that we've established her in Khagdural, we've established her as a character in Khagdural that players will very, very possibly encounter, and I almost want to force an encounter and have her like seek them out in some way, shape, or form. Right? I feel like she would be a really good addition, and we could do some really cool stuff with her. So I'm just going to put a little footnote in there, and you know what I'm going to do here? I'm going to, just to remind myself, I'm going to highlight both of these guys as a reminder to myself that we have unfinished business. There's stuff that I want to use them for and do with them. Because the thing about it too is a lot of these guys, I might not even actually finish them as we're doing this dungeon, because right now the stage of writing that I'm in is I'm trying to get the main campaign done, right? And then once that whole thing is done, then we'll start tossing in all the detailed side missions. So adding in these guys and side missions right now is kind of more so two birds with one stone, as opposed to an intentional part of this process at the moment. But it's all part of it. It's all part of it. Yeah. Okay. I'm content with that. I'm noticing right now, though, I have all of this in here. This is all the old, because I made this portion of the notebook. Hey, come on. OneNote. Why are you so goofy? There we go. This was my old template, and I have a newer, updated template that I'm using these days. So come on, scroll down OneNote. Oh my goodness, OneNote for some reason does not allow for scrolling and highlighting, or selecting and scrolling to be done smoothly and seamlessly. I don't know why, and it's frustrating. It's frustrating because it's slow and tedious to get things going, but it's okay. We got there. All right, that's what we need right there. That's our updated stuff that we're using. So we need actually 5 sets of all of this here. So go through our slow highlighting process again. Come on, you can handle it. I know you can do it. There we go. Copy that. Let's do all that here. 3. That makes, hold on, it's 1, 2, 3, 4. We need one more. Where are we? There we are. There we go. Okay, because we're gonna end up having like 5 sections here, so we can just kind of put all these here. We're just working on a little bit of framework stuff here. So let's see here. We can copy and paste some of this stuff that we're doing here. Copy that. Paste that there. Make that one not a bullet point there. And then for floor 2, that's 1. This is 2 right here. There we go, and we can unbullet point that. We don't need it bulleted. And 3. This part is kind of slow and tedious, but this falls under the more work we do right now. Wait, did I highlight? Yeah, I did. The more work we do right now, the easier it'll be for us as we're getting the rest of the details in. There's 3. Section 4. This one will be the 4 here. And then unbullet point that. And then scroll up. And now we gotta get 5 here. That goes way down to the bottom. All the way down. There we go. Beautiful. Beautiful stuff right there. Okay, so that part's all figured out. Let's see here. What else can we take care of here real quick? This part is going to be quick and easy to take care of, but that part also depends on what enemies we want to do. I think, honestly, at this point in time, I think we're set to go ahead and figure out exactly what enemies we want to put in each floor now. So, I want to think about here. So when I'm talking about villains here for each thing, I always put in main villains and everything. I like to try and keep villains to have a certain sort of like theme, sort of theme or consistency to them. And a lot of that comes from my preferred approach to designing dungeons. When I'm making a dungeon like this and sort of like an all-encompassing, not all-encompassing, that's not exactly the right way to say it, just like one sort of like distinct stage in a campaign, right? So this dungeon that we're working on is one very specific, distinct beat within the overarching campaign. I like to, within this packet of things, basically from the beginning of this dungeon until they beat the final boss, I like to keep things very similar. And the reason I do that is because we can tier it. Like so for example, if we were to be using, say, the Duergar as the main enemy in this dungeon, right? As opposed to using them as an unlikely ally like we're doing. Suppose we use them as the enemy. If we start off with a lot of easier Duergar and then slowly up the ante with more and more difficult Duergar until eventually they're fighting some sort of like boss man Duergar, what that does is it gives players the ability to, as they're exploring this dungeon, learn about these enemies and get better at fighting these enemies. So as they get more challenging, our players also get better at fighting them. And it kind of creates this learning curve that players can enjoy in sort of a meta sense, because they start to understand how these enemies work and everything. And so it kind of gives them this sense of understanding and improving as they're going, right? Rather than just plopping down random enemies that they feel like they're always guessing. You know, and it's something that I've done for a lot of my dungeons for a while now, and it's something that I can see in players when I do this way. I can see them getting better and better, right? And it's always fascinating to see, because monsters that were really easy, or excuse me, that were difficult and challenging for them to figure out how to handle in like the first encounter with them, even when I throw more intense versions of that same monster, right? You know, some more challenging versions of Duergar, they get better and they're faster at clearing out. Like it might have been an easy battle would take them an entire hour and a half, right? Like an entire session would be just one easy battle. And then by the end of the dungeon, because they've gotten so much better at handling it, they can handle 3 or 4 combats in a single 2.5 hour session. Right, and so it's like, and that's a fun thing to provide for your players, because it gives them a sense of accomplishment. It helps them feel like they are getting better, improving, and actually learning, and sort of it helps with the immersion and feeling like they're sort of one and the same as their character, because their character gets better at surviving as they, in a meta sense, learn and understand the enemies a bit better. So it's the main principle, and we're going to dive into that. But we're going to dive into it in like 5 minutes, because I need to use the restroom. So I'm going to take like a 5-minute break. I'm going to run to the bathroom, refresh my beverage, and then we'll be back. We still got another hour of writing stream going on. So sit tight for me. It probably won't even take 5 minutes, perfectly honest. But biology sometimes calls, and it's best to just answer the call rather than try to fight it. So sit tight for just a minute. I will be right back. I thank you for your patience, and we will start looking at some get some cool monsters and stuff going on. So fair enough. I will be right back momentarily. Alright, coming back. There we are. Alright, I'm back. Thank you for your patience. I appreciate it. My bladder appreciates it. You know how it goes. Like I say, sometimes nature calls, and really when that happens, you just kind of have to answer it, because either you answer the call or nature's going to bust down the door, and that's usually pretty embarrassing. So anyway, uncomfortable innuendos aside, we're talking about our enemies here now, the monsters that we want to have in here. So I like to try and keep things pretty, like I say, consistent here. What's going to be interesting about this dungeon, we kind of talked about it last time, how I want to structure it, and I think we have our little notes up here about it. We have our notes up here about it. This dungeon's going to kind of have two distinct components to it. There's going to be the journey to the vault. Oops, pardon me, I'm accidentally bumping my desk here as I adjust. There's the journey to the vault, and then while they're at the vaults, there's going to be something happens, and I'm kind of still working on exactly. I'm trying to still conceptualize exactly how it's going to get triggered. But essentially, what's going to happen is players are going to trigger the flooding of at least part of this dungeon. It's going to force them to leave by a different avenue, and so the last step of this is going to be them leaving the dungeon and actually going back above the surface, right? Because most of this is happening underground. Like, let's pull up our map here. What I have in mind. Let's go ahead and bring ourselves down here to our Khagdural, right? Okay, so players are starting off in the city here, and then they're going under the vaults. The vaults go north, and the idea that I have is that the vaults are actually a bit of a journey away, and they're actually kind of like half under the lake here. And so the idea is that they'll go deep underground, right? There'll be a descent process. Like, there's going to be sort of what I've thought of is like one part of the first part of the dungeon is a lost part of the city, a part of the city that is presently just walled and buried off. It's like a suburb of sorts outside of the main city that is currently just overrun with enemies. And I'm thinking that would be a good place for players to encounter those Durgar allies, or maybe hide something that another Durgar in the city wants them to get as a side quest, right? It's a good place to do all that kind of stuff. And so the first part is going through that. The second and third parts are going to be the descent, right? Them going deeper and further along towards this pathway. The fourth part will be them getting access to the vault, but part of the process is that they accidentally trigger the flooding of the vaults. So the vaults get flooded, and then they must resurface here. Like, there's no way to go back through the underground portion of it to get back, so instead they have to surface, and they show up in they're outside in this valley, and the last part of it is traveling through this valley. So when I'm thinking about my enemies, I'm thinking there's probably going to be two bosses. Whatever the underground, nasty, horrible creature that lives underground and is protecting or living in the vaults, really not really protecting them, just sort of in the way of getting to them, right? There's going to be that thing, but then they come up here, and the real last boss is going to be some sort of creature that lives in the forest. That's just a stark difference from everything they've been doing so far, and I think that would be a really interesting way to mix things up for players. So when I'm thinking about it, there's going to be those two sort of sets of enemies. So what I want to do here is break this up into a couple different portions. So we're going to say, actually keep that underlined. We'll say underground sections. And then what we'll do is I'm going to actually, just to save myself a little bit of work here, copy that, paste it because we want two, but then we're going to take all of these things and just tab them. Oops. Undo that. Do that right there. And then come down here, and then we'll do above ground section. And then do the same thing here where we've got all of these things that we just bumped there. So we're going to have these two sets of enemies here, which I think is going to be really fun and really interesting. For the underground portions, I really want the main bad guys, the main bad guy or bad guys, to just be, like, really just in general, I want the primary enemies to be very, like, aberration monstrosity. We went with, let's pull up, actually, I'm going to bring us over here to D&D Beyond, just so we can start, just do a little window shopping. We're just going to browse. We're just going to browse, do a little window shopping for some monsters here. We did beforehand, we did oozes, and we did some undead, because we had like some spirit creatures, and we had some oozes. right? Because that's kind of the lost tunnels I had in mind. Basically the corpses and spirits of many of the dwarves who were trying to escape Khagdural when it fell, and they just were unable to make it out, and so became spirits entombed inside their once home. And then oozes is just like, I just thought it would be kind of fun to basically have this really slimy, moldy dungeon that players have to navigate. So we went heavy with those, but I think what I want to do for this next one is really, really go the horror route and have some nice aberrations going on here, and then maybe some monstrosities. So I'm going to select our two aberrations and monstrosities here, so we can start to kind of browse our enemies and think about what we want to do. Let's look at what I like to do also is I like to try and choose out what I think would be a really cool final boss, and then from there I can start picking out smaller, less deadly lackeys, so to speak, to put in there, to throw in, that will sort of, like I say, kind of offer hints and clues and a primer for what the final boss will be, whether it's exactly the same or just things that have the same resistances, attack types, so on and so forth. But really what we need to do, actually, if we're going to do that, is we're going to come back over here. Let's get down to business to defeat the Huns and all that. Sorry, I couldn't stop myself. I had to do it. No, I had to do it. So typically speaking, when choosing out what enemies I want to do, the way I said it, so we have our enemies, I call them fodder, soldiers, leaders, and then the boss. The boss being like the boss of that floor or of the whole dungeon. In this situation, in the last floor, we're talking about of the whole dungeon. But I do like to do mini bosses. The final boss will be a little different, but basically, assuming that we're doing a different floor that has a mini boss, fodder, the easiest enemies, 10 of them would make a medium battle. So the fodder are going to be worth about, this is for our final floor, right? Worth about 200 XP a piece, right? Because 10 of them would make a medium battle, which is going to be our 1800. So 180, if we just round that up to 200, that's the easiest way. Soldiers, you want about half of that or double the difficulty, right? So the idea is like somewhere around 5 of them would make a medium battle here. So 5 of them to make 1800. We can go ahead and math that out exactly, although I'm pretty sure I know exactly what we're going to need to do for these guys. 100 divided by 5 brings us 360. We'll have to bump that up a little bit, I think. Although, let me double check that, because I oftentimes will forget. We'll oftentimes forget exactly what our progression of challenge rating. So these guys, so quarter is 50, 1/2 will be 100. CR1 should be 200, right? So CR1 for the easiest in there. And if we go up to CR2, that should bring us to, yes, 450. So we're going to bump these guys up to for some sort of 450 level difficulty here. Right, so that's a little more difficult, but perfectly usable. So then the leaders, the third, like, so if we can think of like easy, medium, difficult, and boss level enemies. So our difficult enemies, 2 of them would make a medium battle. So we can look at something that's about 1,000 experience points worth of challenge here. So we can take a look here and see where that'll bring us up. I know 3 is worth, I'll just slowly climb our way up here. 3 are worth 700, right? Where is it? Yeah, 3 are worth 700. Let's see what our 4 is. Eventually, we got to climb up here and get through them. There we go. Then our 4s are worth 1,100 apiece. So again, that kind of, we're looking at either 2 of them to make 1,400 experience or 2 of them to make 2,200. So we've got it sandwiched on either side. We can go easier or more difficult. Because we're talking about the final vault, the most difficult portion of it all, I am going to go ahead and make the executive decision to do 1,100 XP, or actually, you know what I should do here? CR4. These guys are our CR2, and these guys are CR1. Right, we want to set that up there, and then our boss. So the boss, what I like to do is I like to, like, for the final boss, if it's a mini boss, I'll always just do one of them makes a medium battle, right? Because we don't have this extra mega difficult battle. We just stop at the hard battles, right? So one of them would be a medium challenge. So that way there's room to add some lackeys and stuff in there. Is how I like to do it personally. That can be. But for our final boss, I like to have our big bad of this dungeon as a. I like to have it set so that one of them will be a hard battle. So the final boss, one of them is going to be worth the 2,700 experience points, or as close to that as we can get, right? Because our final boss battle will be worth 3,600 experience points. So if we do 27, that's like just 1,000 experience points to throw around for adding other enemies in there to just give them some minions and stuff. But the boss is going to be, see, now we gotta like check our challenge ratings again, make sure I'm remembering it properly. 1,800 is at CR5, CR6, let's see here, whoops, keep going. Challenge rating 6, where is it? Worth 2,300. We can check our 7s here. 2,900. I think we're going to go ahead and bump it. It's a final boss. We'll go ahead and make it worth 2,900. So a CR7. So worth 900 XP. Oops. XP. CR7. There we go. That's perfect. So now, one thing that's important to keep in mind, though, this is our final one, which is our above ground portion of the battle here, or of the dungeon here. So we also, it's worth it to, when we're thinking about our inside things, we actually have to come down here and think about it from this standpoint, right? Because when we're thinking about our underground stuff, that's different than what our final boss is going to be, which is really fun because they're going to see the boss for that, and they're going to probably be thinking that that's the big bad of the dungeon, but no such luck for them. So we go through the same process. All right, 150 XP. We want to make 10 of them, a challenge here. That brings us to 150 experience points for the fodder. We're gonna go ahead and go with our 200 XP CR1. We're going to go ahead and stick with that for them. Just because I always like to make them a little bit more difficult. Just because, and the reason I do that is because we'll still math out however many we need to add to make ourselves as close to that as possible. So if we end up with one fewer, that's fine. It's just easier to have battles if... Like, it's easier to come up with unique battles, I find, if you need fewer enemies rather than if you need a lot. If you need a lot of enemies, then that really limits you. It's like if you always have to have 10 to make a medium battle, like always have to do that, then that's a challenge. So if you up it there and you don't need quite 10 to do it, then makes it a bit easier, I find. But that's just, it's really personal preference whether you round up or down in those scenarios. So these guys, we need about 5 of them to make 16. We can just say 1,600 experience points, right? So we divide that by 5 to get ourselves a bit more exact when we're contemplating these things. So we want them to be, so that'll math them out to being about 300, 310. So now we have to, again, decide, do we want to go with the 200 or the 450? We already have a 200, so let's go ahead and go with a 450 XP guy. And we'll make that CR2. And now for the leader, we want 2 of them to be worth about 1,600, so each of them to be worth 800, or in this case, we'll go with the 700 XP, and that'll bring us up to a CR3, as we saw. And then the final boss should have about 1 of these. So for this guy, because it's not the big bad, it's just a mini boss of the dungeon, we'll have it set to just 1 of them makes the medium battle rather than 1 of them makes the hard battle, right? Because then we'll level it to hard. And yeah, you guys understand. You guys understand. You guys are smart. So we got to check and see the 1,600 now, just to make sure I'm remembering the progression properly here. Right, CR5 is 1,800, and then let's go back and try and find a CR4 here. CR4s are 1100. So 1100 or 1800. We're again kind of smack in the middle. I'm gonna err on the side of a bit more difficult because I think that's more fun in general. So we'll go ahead and go with a CR5, challenge rating 5, 1800 guy there. Because the other thing too is we can look at our difficult battle. It's gonna be worth 2300. We still got room to add some lackeys in there. Challenge rating 5. There we go. Okay, so that's how these guys are gonna break up. Actually, just because we're in the mindset of doing it and we're thinking about what all of our challenge ratings are, I'm going to do that for all of these guys just real quick. So 10 of these guys need to be worth 100 experience points apiece. So that's going to be our 1/2, our challenge rating 1/2, right? So 100 XP, CR 102. So these guys are going to be worth 200 XP. This one's easy enough to do the way this breaks up to do it mentally. CR 1 here. Wow, my phone is exploding right now. I'm gonna have a serious text conversation to catch up on. I'm part of a group message that's going insane right now. So I'm gonna have to check that out at some point in time. But we're gonna keep writing for now. They can wait. They can wait. I try to not be that guy who's obsessed with his phone. Okay, so now these guys need to be worth about 600 apiece. The leaders here, we're gonna go ahead and think of it as the 1400, so we can do our 700. That'll be the easiest. And that brings us, that's our CR3. And then our boss is gonna be a CR4, because one of them would be a medium, and that brings us our 1100 XP like we saw before. So that one broke up nice and easy. Sometimes the numbers break up nice and easy. Sometimes they're a bit more convoluted here, but that's okay. So then these guys are again kind of the same struggle here, where they're gonna kind of run a little in between. We're gonna go ahead and do our 100 XP challenge rating 1/2 for those easier. It's, you know, that doesn't math out exactly right, but it's close enough. Close enough for our purposes. These guys, the 200, yeah, the 200 will work well enough. 200 XP, R1, and then now 2 of them again. So now this one we can go ahead and do our 400 XP, CR2s here, and then our boss here, we just want one of them to be worth 800. We'll go ahead and go with our 700 XP CR3. That's really close. That works well enough. Close enough to our parameter that we're looking for. And then we got one more floor to do this for. Let's just do it. Let's just do it. Get it on with. Get on with it. That's what I'm trying to say. So these guys, the first one is going to be worth the 50 XP, and this brings our 1/4. Of CR1/4, and then these guys will be worth about 100 XP, which is our 1/2 challenge rating. These guys, 2 of them, will be 200. That's like smack on exactly where we want it to be. That's our CR1. And then the final guy, we'll go ahead and do our 450 XP, which brings us our CR2. There we go. Okay, that's our challenge rating breakdown of what types of enemies we want to find here. We're going to find a lot of different enemies, and we can kind of do it floor by floor. That's the fun part. We can really do it floor by floor. We don't need to come up with all of them right now, but I do want to come up with what our final boss is. I want to come up with those 2 bosses, the underground boss and our above ground boss, because once we figure those out, it's going to really help inform us of exactly how we want to work everything else out as we're going. So a lot of technical stuff. People who have seen a lot of my streams will see that this portion of it is very technical when I'm doing the groundwork, when I'm kind of putting the foundations down for any dungeon. I do a lot of this technical stuff up front, and the reason I front load all of it and do so much of it all in one go right here at the beginning of the dungeon And so that way, that's all taken care of. So once I enter the creative headspace of trying to figure all this out, I don't have to stop and break and do math and remember how to do all that kind of stuff. I can just say, like, okay, I know I need this challenge rating of an enemy here. I know I need to stick to this parameter. And let's be creative about it and find the tools that I need to put in to get exactly what I'm looking for out of this. So let's look at our final bosses here. So if we're talking about our underground final boss, which is what I'm actually more excited to do right now, we need him to be our CR5. So let's go back over here, and let's just filter this for us here. 5 to 5. We want 5 to 5. We've already picked out either Aberration or Monstrosity. I haven't really decided exactly which one I want to do quite yet. And this is where, so I talked a little bit earlier about thinking about the aesthetic and the world building, and then find stats that fit as you go. So what I'm going to do, basically, the way I choose a final boss, and really monsters in general, is I look at the pictures and I say, yeah, that looks cool, and that looks like it fits the attitude, the atmosphere, the mood that I'm trying to go for in this dungeon. And in this dungeon, I'm trying to go with, like, just, like, horrible, wretched, horrible things. And the first thought I have is, these little squid Cthulhu guys would be kind of fun to throw in there. The concern is, will I have enough lackeys that are similar in nature for that to be meaningful? Because this guy, the little gnome, Ceramorph, I'm guessing, if we, like, those are our aberrations, right? So just for a thought experiment, let's get rid of our monstrosities, and let's bring that up to level 9, say. And then sort it by CR, by challenge rating here. Right, we can kind of go down and see what other things show up. Yeah, so we've got our Mind Flayers. Those are actually above. So as cool as that little gnome guy would be, the logical next step here is for our Mind Flayers to show up, and those are more difficult than what our players will be prepared for at this extent. So they're kind of out. So while they would be a really cool aesthetic for this, they don't fit our needs. So let's go back and look again. Now, immediately, these guys are really freaky, but they are clearly an above-ground creature, so they won't really do what we need. We can try and, let me try and do, we can set up, like, Underdark, and we can set up, actually, we can do Underdark, and we can do Mountain. We might even be able to get away with Urban, too, considering this is part of, it's underground, but it's a city. So let's filter these a little bit to try and help us have exactly what we're looking for. It's like a Bulette or something like that. The mole guys. Those guys aren't... Oops, not those guys. That guy might be interesting. These guys aren't quite as horrid as I'm looking for. I'm looking for some real, like, 80s rubber suit, nasty, monster, horrible things is what I'm looking for. So, like, something like that is much more on par with what I'm thinking here. That guy's kind of like a natural progression of the Bulettes, at least in appearance, but... The Umber Hulk might be okay. So Yuan-Tis aren't going to really make much sense in here. Oh, we already looked at the Umber Hulk. A Roper, which is just an uncomfortable name to say. I don't know. It's a little close. It's a little close to being just like horrible to say. Ooh, that's a nasty little... The Banderhob, that guy's a little nasty. It's not not the worst idea, but I'm going to actually get rid of these filters again and just use my imagination as the filter. It's usually pretty easy to think about. Yeah, see, like, that guy doesn't look like he would really fit in there. Interesting. Interesting that would be such a difficult challenge rating. Oh, that's a really interesting one. Look at this guy. Oh, I don't actually have access to that one yet. I'm planning on getting... Witchlight, but I have not done so. That's a cool enemy, though. Just looking at that, that's really cool. It's really cool. I don't know the full context of it. Let's see here. Ooh, see, something like that would be kind of cool. Kruthix are always good. I think the hard part about Kruthix is, like, there's the Kruthic and there's, like, young Kruthic, so we might be kind of limited in our options for easier versions of it. So there's that's an option. Slots. See, if we did like the slots or those, this like the Banderhob or something like that, we could go with like a very slimy salamander type thing or theme. Sea lion. Get it? It's like a sea lion. I'm easy to please sometimes. All the time. I'm easy to please all the time. I'm a simple man. I'm a simple man. I see, now this is what I'm talking about right here. Like they're calling that a water-based one, but gosh, you could easily just flavor that to be existing in a mountain. That thing is creepy looking. That's perfect. I like that, and gives them psychic stuff. Actually, that would work really well too, because it's amphibious, and if we're gonna have the final part of this dungeon take place right near the lake, that would be kind of interesting. It'd be kind of interesting to throw scum in there. That's not a bad. Okay, let's hold that in the back of our brain space here. Might be a good one to fall back on. What's this guy? Ooh, that's an interesting. Ooh, we could use him as a boss and just have like bugs and creatures and stuff like that. That's nice and creepy. There's a lot of good options here. A lot of really good options here. Okay, here's what I want to do. Here's what I want to do now. Let's go ahead and go a bit. Let's widen our scope a little bit, and I want to see sort of thematically what sort of aberrations and monstrosities are available to us in the easier end of things, so that way we can make sure we have proper minions. Because we've got a couple potential bosses in mind, so let's try and find a reasonably thematically matching set of lackeys here. Let's see here. Nope, not gonna answer that one. Ooh, that's creepy. Ooh, doesn't really fit any of the final bosses we're looking at. Got adult Kruthic. Yeah, see, so we got plenty of Kruthics. We could do like an army of Kruthic, I guess. It's not the worst option. I feel like for me though, with my writing, the way I do it, I feel like I end up kind of falling back on the Kruthic. I kind of dip from the Kruthic well a lot. That guy's kind of creepy. That'd be kind of a fun one. Little imp-looking guy. The egg hunters. Oh, we could go with like the different egg hunters. That is, I'm pretty sure that's on a different phone, the exact same number that I just didn't answer from on this other phone. Because I got both my phones here. Hold on a second. Hold on. I gotta see something here. Am I being bombarded by? That is totally the same exact number. That's gotta be a spam call then. Because I don't cross-reference those numbers at all. Okay, carrion crawler is good. That could be an option. Ettercaps. Oh, the gibbering mouther. If we went with the roper, we could use a gibbering mouther too. Those are really good. Those are some really good Cronenberg style enemies we could throw in this cave. Let's see here. Mimic. Mimics are always fun. Oh yeah, the Nothics. A lot of cool. Yeah, nope, that's not gonna work. Shadow Mastiffs. I don't know. So many different ideas going on here. Ooh, look at that. Look at that horrible thing. Look at that horrible thing. Alright, let's see here. Okay. I am sorry to do this, but apparently that number has left messages on both phones. And so I need to, I don't know. I guess I got to check that out. So I am going to, what time do we have here? You know what? It's early. And I really don't like cutting things off unceremoniously like this. but I think I gotta take care of those things. So I'm going to end the stream here. I'm gonna end the stream here, and I apologize for doing it so quick and unceremoniously. But I'm gonna end the stream here so I can take care of some stuff. And you know, sometimes that's just the way it goes. It's just the way it goes. But we're gonna call it a day here. So thank you so much for everyone for stopping by. This is gonna be the end of the writing stream. I do intend to come back in a little while to do gaming. Typically starts at around 1:30 to 1:45 Eastern time, so half hour, 45 minutes from now. So I will plan on starting around that time again. So if you want to see me doing some gaming, you can come by and check me out. Otherwise, thank you for stopping by. I appreciate you, and we'll catch you next time. If you do want to see some of my past stuff, some other stuff of me working on writing or playing games and stuff, you can check out my YouTube channel. Also, if you want up-to-date announcements on what I'm doing with my streams, or if you want to just participate in discussions about homebrew stuff, you can join my Discord server, and you can find both of those links, the YouTube and the Discord, on my Twitch channel. Those are both resources available to you. I will also hopefully be streaming tomorrow as well. So feel free to check me out tomorrow, same time, if you want to see more writing. Hopefully tomorrow we won't be interrupted and have to cut off sooner than intended. But you know, that's just how it goes. Sometimes life invades. So I appreciate your understanding as I end soon. Hopefully at least this hour and a half was entertaining for you. You got some good stuff in there, and yeah, I appreciate each and every one of you guys. I appreciate your support. It means a lot to me. Have a lot of fun here with you guys. And yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing you next time. So take care of yourselves, and I will hopefully be back in a little bit. Otherwise, maybe I'll see you tomorrow. Either way, I appreciate you guys. Take care of yourselves, and we will see you later.